Rock on. So what I want to do is I want to address a couple things that some questions that I've had in regards to the cards and the outline. So there's a couple of things that I want to go over regarding the cards and the outline. So if you're still outlining, this is going to be wonderful for you. And this is session 4, by the way. And if you are still working on developing your characters, which we will continue to do, you know, this is going to be amazing for you. So if you just between these sessions, the first one to this session right now, if you incorporate these elements within your story, you're going to be head and shoulders above the masses who are out there storytelling. That I can promise you. I guarantee you that. You're going to be doing things that no one else is doing, or at least the masses are not doing. So immediately you're going to be separated from the masses just by incorporating some of the elements that we've already talked about, especially in regards to our experiences and our unique experiences, us as a person, being able to follow those rabbit holes to find out, like, you know, different elements in our lives where things happen, where they first began and where things took root, and then they began to kind of shift in our life, and then decisions were made out of those things. When we incorporate that and when we give those to our characters, that's an amazing thing, because a lot of people don't give their characters experience. They look at their character development and they say, well, let's break it down. And we're going to look at their professional life, which is correct. You should be doing that. Their personal life, which is correct. You should be doing that. And professional, personal, and private life. All those things we need to look at in regards to character development, listing how these people grew up, you know, from birth to the age of 10. That's a great time span to start to look at initially. Then you go from age 10 to age 20, looking at their personal, private, and their professional life, and then doing in 10-year blocks and breaking them down that way until obviously we get to your character. But it's the experiences of your character that's going to separate you from the masses, because most people, that's all they do in regards to character development, is they look at those elements and say, hey, you know, this is what this person, this is how, with the situation they were born in, mom and dad or grandparents taking care of them, or another relative, this is what they're doing growing up, this is their personality, all these different things. But one thing that I believe people lack is putting the experiences within their characters to really make them come alive and stuff. So that is one thing. So again, we're going to look at, just finish up our looking at these cards. There's a couple of elements that I want to address based on questions that I received this week. And I said, hey, I'll do those as a group, just in case anybody else has the same questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get that fired up real quick. And we're going to look at that cards that we did last week. And I don't even believe I pulled them up. So you just got to give me a second. So rock on. Let me find where my cards are. All right, we're getting, oops, wrong card. Okay, here we go. And let's get back to you guys. Rock on and screen share. Hey, I see people this time. Woo! Amazing. Yes, I'm so excited. That was so hard last time because I didn't see anything but the screen. So very, very cool. Now you guys see the cards, right? Wonderful. Okay, one point that I want to bring up in regards to these cards is, I'm gonna move our picture over to the side. Okay, here, or actually here, the resolution. Okay. Now you guys, I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch that little pre-video that I did for before session 2, where I kind of talked about making sure you got your cards. And then I talked about making sure you establish the end or the resolution to your story. Okay. This, I wish, as far as the cards, since I already put them on our Legacy Street Writers group, I wish I labeled this one 1, because this is really how you should begin. This is the first element you need. This is the most important element you need to tell your story, is how your story resolves. So I did bring that up a couple times in our sessions. I made that pre-video, but I really wish that I would have emphasized this as far as making sure this is your starting point, is how you want your story resolved. So you can have a bunch of ideas and a lot of different things going through your head. Oh, I wish I could tell a story about this person or this guy or this girl or this thing or whatever. It's like, okay, great. You have an idea to tell this. Now, how do you want it to resolve? Because that's going to influence every single element in your story to get to this point. You see? And so that is a very, very crucial thing. So if you are struggling, you make sure that you already know how you want your story to resolve, because this actually is your starting point, you know? And I'm just going to say this just because it was really, really, really cool, is there's a scripture in the Bible that says God establishes the end from the beginning. I just think it's a rock on, totally cool thing. So if God does it, I'm thinking, man, I think that might be a good idea. It's totally, he says, I declare the end from the beginning. I establish the end from the beginning. I make known the end from the beginning. So he says, okay, where do I start? I'm starting with the end result. So you guys really get that on the inside of you, that I'm going to have a resolution to my story before I do anything else. Take that idea and say, well, what can I do with that particular idea? You know, and then it starts with the resolution. All right. Then once you have the resolution, then you say, well, how do I want it to start? And then you go to your inciting incident. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that? I cannot emphasize that enough. Okay. Start with your end, and that will set up your path to get to that end. Sometimes you will hear people say, oh, you got to start with a log line. Just so you guys know, a log line is a marketing tool, okay? Some people use it to make sure they stay on track for their stories, which if it works for them, 100%, you go for that and you do that, exactly that. I don't create my log line in the beginning. The log line is your premise. Remember, we talked about that in regards to your premise, your protagonist trying to do something, the antagonist is standing in the way, and what's at stake. Okay, that's your premise. That is your log line. Some people create that log line to help them stay on track as they write their stories. This is going to help you stay on track to write your story. Your end result, your resolution, what is it that you want your audience? Because our thing is the easy approach: experience, express, embody, or extract and embody. What do we want our audience or our reader to experience from our story? That's going to come from your resolution. What do you want them to experience at the end of your story? And what is it that you're trying to express through your story that your audience or your reader is going to experience, okay? And then that takes us to the beginning to say, now, where is the best place for us to start? How are we going to open up our film? And your film, I'm telling you, you can open up with the inciting incident, with the big bells and whistles, with the explosions, with somebody committing the crime of the century with the asteroid and Armageddon. You can do all those things, but the thing is, you want to have the best ending to support your story, and you want to open your story, what they say, as late as possible. Oh, start late, get out early. Start late, get out early, which means if I have a story about something that takes place at a school, I use this as an example in my filmmaking book, where little Johnny, he could wake up and he can get ready for school and he can go through the process and have breakfast and eat, get on the bus and take his ride to school and go attend his first class. He can do all that. And we could certainly open the film like that. But if none of that matters to the story, then you cut that out. There's no reason for it, you see? So if it doesn't matter to the story, you want to open up as closely to this inciting incident and you want to place this inciting incident as close to the opening of your story to get things going, because your inciting incident is really what's going to hook your readers into your story. So you have a decision to make. We start with our resolution. Then we go back and say, how do we want our film to open? And we want to open up late, and we want to get out of our story early, which means we don't want that resolution phase to drag on. Okay, so we go from 1. I wish I would have put that as 1. Okay, we go from 1 to 2 to our inciting incident, which is 3. Okay. All right. So this is the question that I had. First off, someone asked, can I have more plot points than the ones that I have listed? Plot point number 1, plot point number 2, and this optional plot point right here. The answer to that is you can have as many plot points in your story as you would like. Okay, as long as those plot points are supporting your story. You don't just throw them in there for the sake of throwing them in there. What this does when you're doing your outline and you put plot point number 1 and plot point number 2, or this optional plot point, as you're outlining, you're leaving little breadcrumbs to get you to your resolution, to the end result of where it is that you're wanting to go. Okay, so, and here, this is enough substance, because obviously you're going to be filling in these cards with different plots or even plot points that spin things in a different direction. But that's exactly what you're going to be doing as you're filling in your cards like puzzle pieces. Again, I just wrote notes on these cards, so I didn't, wasn't trying to say, this character is going from here to here to here to here. These are just notes, but you can put as many plots and plot points in your outline as needed to support your story. But just keep in mind, people that are writing the novels, you're writing your books, writing your stories, you guys have as many pages as you want to be able to tell your story. You screenwriters, you do not. Okay, you have between 90 and 120 pages. And remember, if we're just starting out as writers, you're not going to try to push the 120 page mark. All right. So you have a limited amount of pages to tell your story. And so if you're having a bunch of different plot points in there and you keep spinning the action in a different direction, then you're going to be pushing your page count up and past that 120 threshold potentially. So potentially, see, that's the word I kept messing up over and over again. And nobody was like, that's not a real word, Trevor. Potentially. I kept saying potentially, but anyway, so the answer to that question is you can have as many plot points as you want in your story to support your story. Don't just throw them in there for no reason, okay? They should support your story and the outcome that you are wanting to have. So rock on with that. So that should answer that question. Put as many as you want. This here, plot point 1, plot point 2. And if you want to throw in that optional plot point, you have enough substance to write a book. You have enough substance to tell a feature film, to write a 60-minute pilot, so you are good to go with that. Put in as many as you want, as long as they're supporting your story. All right. And so here I want to address something, because with that question came this. You remember I said, I'm going to show you my process. And if elements within my process work for you, just like Bruce Lee and his philosophy, absorb what's useful, discard the rest. Okay. If something is useful for you, absorb it. Great. Take it. Now, if I'll tell you it's a rule or a law in screenwriting, then whether you like it or not, you should probably stand on that, because I'm not going to tell you that unless it's something that generally this is the way that it is, right? So in regards to the process of outlining a story using the 3-act structure, I have my process, and that's the process that I'm sharing with you, okay? I was insecure about sharing, the way that I do things, because I just wasn't ready to do that. Even though I've been doing this for many years now, I wrote a filmmaking book that has a whole section on storytelling and screenwriting, but I didn't put my process. I just put a general process that works, okay? How I started before I really kind of started to embrace my own methods and my own understanding, because if you take ownership of certain elements, they will become yours. And that's what I would really encourage you to do. Certain elements, you rename them, you make them your own. You say, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to put something else in there or put another method in there, and then I'm going to run with that. So anyway, here in Act 2, okay, Sid Field teaches a method. This is Sid Field's basically his outline, or at least he really kind of pushed it and people embraced his method of storytelling, but this goes way beyond Sid Field. But that's where I really got a hold of it and got dialed in with my storytelling until I started to tweak things out for myself. Okay, so in Act 2, which is our biggest section here, this is where most screenplays fail, most stories. If you're writing a book, this is an area that you really want to focus on. Obviously, we want to focus on the whole thing, but this is where most fail. So you want to make sure that you're really dialed in the Act 2. All right. So what Sid Field teaches and other people, they teach something called a pinch. That term and even what they were really expressing never really resonated with me. Okay. But it was basically inserting a sequence. And I'll tell you what a scene is simply a moment in time captured on your, whether you're writing it or captured on film at a time, a place, a setting where you have a character. So if I have a man sitting in his kitchen, okay? If I have a man sitting in his kitchen and he's sitting at the dining room table and I'm filming him, that's a scene. It's one moment in time at a particular place, at a particular location with my character. And your scene can be with or without a character. And as an example to that is if we did an establishing shot, we wanted to show that we're at this person's house. Okay. So this man that I'm talking about, if I wanted to establish that I'm at his house, I'm going to write exterior, man's house, night. Okay. And then I could shoot a scene of the exterior of this person's house. Obviously, there's no character in there, but it's still a scene. So a scene can have a character in it or it cannot have a character in it, okay? Because shooting the outside of his house, no character in it, but it is a scene, all right? Hopefully everybody's clear on that. It's just a moment in time that you're filming something or writing something where something is taking place in one location, all right? A sequence is a series of scenes. It's a chain of scenes with a beginning, a middle, and an end, okay? That's a sequence. So if I have that man that's sitting at the kitchen table and whatever, so he's just sitting at the kitchen table and say a woman comes home and they get into an argument, all right? So we're still at a scene, and now that argument moves to the closet where the woman starts to get undressed or whatever. And then that argument moves to the bedroom and they're still fighting. And then they end up going to sleep mad at each other. That is a sequence. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a start and it has a finish. That is a sequence. Okay. I don't know if I said scene a moment ago, but that is a sequence. She comes home. They get into an argument because maybe she's out, extra late, or maybe she's out doing something she shouldn't do. They get into an argument and that argument moves around the house. And then the outcome is they go to bed and they're mad at each other. Okay. Simple illustration. Regardless, it shows the point. That is a sequence. We're going from one location to another location, and there is a beginning, there is a middle, there is a conclusion or a resolution. And that resolution is they go to sleep mad at each other. Okay, so everybody understands what a scene is and what a sequence is. Pretty easy. Okay, now this is what they say is a pinch. We are in Act 2. So what we want to do is we want to remind the audience that we're in the conflict phase or the confrontation phase, which is Act 2. So within here, at this moment, typically right here, people would put what they call a pinch, or the pinch would be resolved here. Same thing with here. It's a sequence, a pinch, I don't call it a pinch. I didn't really care for that. It didn't resonate with me. Although Sid Field, it rocks. I absolutely love the way that he explains storytelling. But a pinch is a sequence within Act 1, the first part of Act 1, and within the first part of Act 2 that has a beginning, a middle, and an end to remind the audience that we're in the conflict phase. Okay, so there is going to be a substantial conflict that takes place that has a sequence meaning it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. All right. So a pinch is a sequence within the conflict phase that has a start, middle, and end that reminds the audience that we're in conflict. So it has to show conflict. All right. So once I heard it worded from someone else, then everything started to click with me. Okay. And how I now see that pinch, what's tying together the conflict or the confrontation phase, what I now call it for myself is I call it wide 1 and wide 2. Okay. Because I actually do filmmaking. I've produced 3 independent feature films on my own, obviously produced and bringing a team together. So wide shots, close-ups, medium shots, or whatever. So I call it wide 1 and wide 2, but it's WYD. I put it WYD because it just reminds me. So WYD for me is Who's Your Daddy? All right. So Who's Your Daddy 1 goes here for me, and Who's Your Daddy 2 goes here for me. Okay. Now, the reason why I call it that, it's because it's the antagonist that is setting up this pinch, or Who's Your Daddy, and the antagonist is the one that is doing or initiating this sequence to remind that protagonist, I'm in charge, I'm the boss, I run things up in here, who's your daddy? You know what I mean? So if there was a crime that was committed, and that's our inciting incident, and our protagonist comes in and he's supposed to be solving the crime, and as this moves along and transitions into Act 2, maybe the protagonist thinks he's gaining ground and he's gonna, nail the antagonist, and he's gonna get him, he's gonna catch him. Now this sequence comes along, and maybe just using this as an example, it's a murder sequence, okay? It's a sequence that comes along that says, I'm in charge up in here, meaning the antagonist. So I just say, who's your daddy? So this sequence, which means it has to have a beginning, middle, and end. I'll use an example since we're talking about a crime and trying to solve a murder, is the antagonist. We see him, and even if you don't want to show this antagonist at that point, that's perfectly fine still too. Maybe he's still veiled, but you want to show this person preparing to commit their crime. But I'm trying to make it easy. So I'm saying, yes, we see him and he's getting his tools ready to commit the crime, okay, to commit another murder. Now we see him commit that murder. And now we see they discover the body. All right. That has a beginning, the preparation for the murder. That has a middle, the actual committing of the murder. And that has an end, the discovering of the body, to remind the protagonist that the antagonist is saying, who's your daddy? You know what I mean? I got this. And I hope that makes sense for you. You tweet that out, because I know that a lot of people, more and more people are getting sensitive to what people say. So I get sometimes am reluctant to say certain things, but I don't mean any disrespect, but I'm like, who's your daddy? Now, so as I'm writing, I'm thinking about that sequence for my antagonist specifically, to create that elevating conflict, to show the antagonist is the one that's saying, I'm the boss up in here. All right. And so because of that sequence, a logical beginning, middle, and end, there's the antagonist saying, who's your daddy? And so that obviously is going to take your protagonist down a notch. And as things escalate again, there is another who's your daddy scene that takes place here. All right. Now, keep in mind, they're not exacts. You don't have to put it exactly here. You don't have to put it exactly here. Same thing with the plot points. Maybe they happen a little bit earlier. Same thing with this plot point. Maybe it happens a little bit earlier in your story, or even just maybe a tad bit later, okay, depending on your story. But you want to have those moments where a logical sequence, a beginning, middle, and end, shows the protagonist that the antagonist is saying, I'm the boss up in here. All right. So that'll take place here, and that'll take place here. All right. Does anybody have any questions on that? Trevor, do you have a set of cards for something you've already sold, published to see? You know what? I have my cards like put away, but I did actually write some to show you guys like right now. Okay. So yes, I got some cards that I want to show you because I'm going to give you an example so you guys can see what it is that I'm writing. But once I write something, I tuck myself stuff away and I kind of keep it put aside. They're actually in storage because if anything happens at my house, I want to make sure that my stuff is safe, things that I want to keep. So, but I have some examples that I want to show you right here in this class. Does anybody else have any questions on that? We know what a scene is, we know what a sequence is, and we know who's your daddy. Or phrase it however you want. You can call it a pinch if you want. That's just basically pinching together this big series right here, this big context that we call confrontation. All right. It's just making sure that it holds together. All right. So does anybody have any questions on that? All right. So we're good. All right. So I'm going to give you some just little juicy little tidbits. And you guys that are already working on your outlines, working on your character development, maybe you've already completed, you're still able to look at these elements and say, I want to make sure that they're incorporated within my story. You guys do remember that I brought up character-driven stories versus plot-driven stories. I don't know if you guys recall. I touched on it briefly, but in case you didn't get a hold of that, they're really, really simple to understand. A character-driven story really focuses on the development of that character, okay? External conflict and what that does internally to your character to cause that person to change. It's the characters that are motivating the action and driving the story to this end result, okay? To resolve the story. It's the character. So essentially, it's focusing more on character and character development, the internal conflicts on the inside of your character that is being revealed externally. All right. That's character driven. We want to see that change. We want to see the internal conflict being expressed externally, because that's how we have to do it in screenwriting. And if you're writing a book or if you're writing a novel, oh man, it's like fair game. Everything's fair game. You write all the thoughts, you write all the feelings, you write anything that the character is thinking and motivations and all that stuff, because you tell us those things. In screenwriting, you can't tell us those things. Bad, you know, because you have to write visually and you have to write to show what your character is feeling internally. You can't just say they're feeling like this on the inside when it comes to screenwriting. So character driven, your development of the character really is the focus of your story. A plot driven story is one where the events are driving the story and the character is responding to that. They're obviously initiating actions out of that, but the character development is really not the push of the story. It's the events that are taking place that are driving the story. You see that with a lot of action movies that are straight up just action movies where you don't really see, and yes, in a lot of films, there's a character arc, but that's really not the emphasis in a lot of plot-driven stories. Plot-driven stories are really motivated and moving the story by the events that take place and the actions that occur, and the characters are responding to that, but you may not see much of the character development within your characters. So it really is whether you're emphasizing character and their development, or whether you're emphasizing the events. If you're saying that my resolution, the message I want to send is I want my audience and my readers just to go on a fun ride, a popcorn flick. There's some movies that you go to that you just want to sit back and enjoy your popcorn and sit on the edge of your seat, and you want to see all these action taking place or whatever. Typically, those are plot driven. You see, if you want to make that story even better, then you find that balance between plot driven and character driven. Here's the reality. A lot of people, after all is said and done, don't talk about a lot of plot driven movies weeks or months or years down the road. That's the reality. In plot driven movies that are really the emphasis and the push is on the plot. That's not always the case, of course, because I can give you some examples, but the examples that I would bring up have a balance between the plot and the character development. That is your sweet spot. That's golden right there. Me as a person, okay, and this is part of my character development, okay? Me as a person, I avoid a lot of character-driven movies. That's just me personally. Certain movies, because they impact me so much. I'm a very, very, very emotional person, and they impact me so much that I get traumatized. I was jacked up when I watched Titanic, and I never watched it again, ever. I will not. That movie jacked me up, right? I'm a crybaby. I'm surprised I haven't cried here, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore, embarrassed, but I'm not ashamed of it anymore because I got it from my dad, phenomenal musician. My dad is a manly man, martial arts, started teaching us at a very, very young age, military guy. I mean, this dude's cut, ripped, whatever. My dad rocks. But he calls me honey. I'm 50 years old. He still calls me honey. He still calls me baby. You know what I mean? When you hug him, he will hug you for a lifetime and sit there and breathe. My dad cries on commercials. And I'm trying to embarrass my dad. My dad rocks. He rocks. But he cries on commercials. Guess who started crying on commercials? Me. Now, here's the thing. I have not gone so far as to clap like my dad does on a commercial. My dad will cry and he will go, "Oh, honey, that is beautiful. That is beautiful." Tears pouring out of his eyes on a commercial. You see? So for me personally, I don't watch a lot of the deep character-driven movies because they affect me really so deeply. Okay? But character development, obviously, the emphasis is on the character development, the relationships. As things happen, the events, the plots that we put into the story, they are causing your character to deal with internal and obviously external conflict. And we're seeing the shift. And a lot of it is about relationship. All right. Plot driven, just a lot of action going on. But if you find that sweet spot, this is for me personally, that sweet spot is that balance between plot driven and character driven. Okay. The best movies out there, in my opinion, have that balance between plot driven and character driven, but that's just me personally. So here's a tidbit that I want to give you because I said that we were going to be talking a little bit more about character. Here in Act 1, we're obviously in our setup phase, we're going to meet our main characters. When we meet our main characters, as soon as humanly possible, you want to introduce your character, and you want us to get to relate to your character as quickly as possible, which means you want us to reveal certain aspects about your character. Your main character in your film, your hero, your protagonist, we have to care about. And this is extremely important. We have to care about your character, even if they're dirtbags. If they're the main character, we have to care what happens to them. Okay? They can be total sleazebags or they can be perfect angels. Doesn't matter. If it's your character and we are following your story through their life, We have to care what happens to them. Therefore, we must care about them. They have to be somebody that we can relate to. All right. And if we can't relate to them directly, maybe someone else that we know because of experience that we have, relationships that we have with other people, we can relate to this character and what it is that they're going to. We have to get to know your character, and it's best to do that as soon as possible. And you can even do that even before the inciting incident. The inciting incident happens to drive that story, and it kind of starts your story. It hooks that audience. That's really what the purpose of it hooks that audience. But when you're introducing your character, not necessarily when you first meet them, but it's great. If you can incorporate that, wonderful. But within setup, you want to introduce your character. Let us know their motivations in life. What is it that they're trying to accomplish in life? Let us know what their fears are. Let us know what their insecurities are, because we can all relate to that. And you have to do it in a way that's not just, oh, well, my name is Trevor and I'm insecure about this. If you guys want to know, I don't know if I brought this up, but one of my biggest fears, because I was asked this in the first online class that I ever taught. No one's ever asked me this before, but in the first online class that I ever taught, someone asked me, who was your arch nemesis growing up? Okay. That was the question, and I had to stop and think about that. And you know what? I dealt with depression my whole life, so I pretty much kept to myself. I was always alone myself. So I didn't really have an arch nemesis. You know what my arch nemesis was, and still continues to be? The telephone. I have a fear of telephones. You see, it does not matter. I can absolutely love you and want to talk to you, but if that phone rings, my heart starts to beat real fast. I will start to pace. I will literally start sweating, and I'll just let it go to voicemail, and I'll never check the message. I mean, now I've gotten better at it. I've gotten better, but my character development, that's been my arch nemesis my whole life, and it still affects me to this day. I can have my friends call, and I will watch that phone ring. And this is what I do. If I know that I need to talk to people, I will get in my car and I'll drive around and I'll make all my phone calls at once, back to back to back to back to back, so I do not have to use the phone anymore. That's a part of my character development. Okay. But so if I had that fear as a character, if I was a character and I had that fear, there's certainly a way to introduce that. Simply right there in the very beginning, the phone could ring and I can be reluctant to pick it up. That's going to give the audience a hint about something for sure. Why is he not answering the phone? Is it because of the person? No, it could be because of something internally with me. I just won't answer the phone. If I have a reason to call somebody or a reason why you're calling me, and I know that there's a reason for it, then I'm okay with using the phone. Okay. Because I still do phone meetings, but I know that there's a reason for them and they're very specific. So anyway, but that's just a tidbit. So in the very beginning, when you're introducing your character, let us know what their fears are. Let us know what their motivations, what is it they're wanting? And I'm not talking about a motivation to solve the inciting incident. I'm not talking about a motivation that is being influenced by that inciting incident. I'm just talking about their character in general, their greatest fears. What is it that they want to see happen in their life? You know, what is it that they have anxiety about? You know, these things you want to begin to reveal about your character as soon as possible. Okay, does everybody got that? If you do that and you incorporate those things within your character early, then your audience and your reader will start to see some type of a connection with them. Because maybe that audience member or the reader or that audience can relate specifically on those terms of, dang, that's me too. All right. And so I'll give you an example of something that I think is a very, very cool ending. I mean, a very, very cool beginning to a film. And it's nothing crazy over the top at all. But many of you guys have probably seen Training Day. Let me check this chat real quick. Oh, okay. So many of you guys have probably seen Training Day, that movie with Denzel Washington. Okay. Awesome flick, man. In my opinion, awesome. Man, Ethan Hawke killed it. Denzel Washington killed it. And check this out. In the first 2 pages of the screenplay, just absolutely beautiful, amazing writing, just simple, to the point, nothing over the top, nothing flowery, nothing elaborate. But if you watch the movie, this is what happens. It's morning time. The character wakes up. Jake Hoyt's character wakes up, does his alarm clock. He's looking for his wife that should be sleeping in bed next to him. She's not there. He goes into another room and she's nursing the baby that they just had, a 9-month-old baby. And there's some just quick dialogue. So we see him getting ready. He's a cop. We see him getting ready and he starts to talk to his wife. This is not something that you're forcing on your audience. It's amazing. He says, man, hey, it's his first day that he's going to train with this new unit. And then he says something in his dialogue. He says, man, the wife brings up, hey, don't mess this opportunity up, blah, blah, blah. And he says something along the lines of, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make detective. You should see their houses. Simple as that. He didn't say, I want to make a better life for you. I want to get out of this dump. I want to do all these things. He did not say that. But with those words, he's implying something. He said, man, you should see the houses that they live in. And then just, a few dialogue later, he says, I feel like it's like the first day of baseball tryouts, and whatever. He just wants to know if he made the team. So there's so much in his character that was revealed in the first 2 pages. What you get from that, he's like, man, you should see their houses. And the way that he communicated with his wife, the way that it was shown on screen, you can see that love and affection that he has for his wife and his family within 2 pages. And then later on in the script, from page 4 till about 7, several times he mentions his wife. Okay. So that says a lot about his character without him having to come out and say any of those things directly. Now, how many of us want a better life for our families? Most people that watch it, most adults, obviously, because kids aren't necessarily, well, actually kids do think like that because, I got younger kids still at the house and they're saying, Dad, when I grow up and get older, I'm going to buy you a house and I'm going to buy you this or whatever. So it's in our hearts to do. We want to take care of the people that we love. And in those 2 pages, it was so beautifully expressed without even saying that. He just said, man, I wish you could see, or not I wish you could see their houses, but he says, you should see the houses that they live in, but just in his relationship with his wife, you could see how much he cared for her. You want to be able to express those things about your characters early on in your screenplay so that we can relate, because every single one of us can relate to wanting to do better for our families, you see? And so think about that when you're introducing your characters, all right? So that's huge. They should be somebody we care about, somebody we can relate to. They cannot be flawless. They cannot be invincible, because not one person on the planet is flawless. Not one person on the planet is invincible. So if that's what your character is, then how do we even relate to him? You see? And I'm just going to tie it up. If we don't care about our characters, then we don't care what happens to them. So plots don't even matter. Everybody got that? Does anybody have any questions on that? Since I'm just talking, I'm going to take this thing off real quick. Stop share. Nobody has any questions? Let me see. It's okay to intro to character on the first page and then not see them for. Absolutely. Absolutely, Samantha, just as long as you are keeping the ties to that character and whatever happens relates to that character, okay?
Yeah, it sort of pops in like 1, 2, 3 is sort of the introduction of everything. And then it's like 38, page 38, but it's all coming together. There's things happening.
This is the protagonist and we don't see him till page 38 again?
There's like busyness going on that it's like, because it's like a kidnapping. It's like a woman and
Gotcha.
child
Okay.
kidnapping and action, but there's like a terrorist plot going on, there's things happening, and I'm
Gotcha.
like,
Okay.
well, we don't really revisit it, even though things are moving forward, I think.
Gotcha.
But
Okay. Then yes, we should talk. We should talk about your story. Obviously, you can write whatever you want, and you can write it beautifully. Okay. Just as long as we keep that connection to the protagonist, so he doesn't get lost in everything that's going on. Because there's ways of showing of keeping that connection. So that's what
my
we'll have to look
flashbacks, I
at.
have
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
flashbacks
All right.
that bring him up without quite calling him the bad guy, the terrorist. We don't know this. It's very wet weaved and stuff. So I'm like, I think it can be followed nicely. It's sort of like, I think I told you, it was like Forrest Gump with the flashbacks, even though it's not the story. It's I'm telling the story moving forward by going back to enrich who the characters are.
Gotcha. We'll get you dialed in. If any of you guys are not sending me messages, again, I will say this: it's your fault if you're stuck. Seriously, because right now during this class, you got me. I've committed my time to you guys. You see, I've blocked out my time for you guys so that if you have questions, someone even asked, hey, can I, I'm just going to say it. Can I pay you for your time so we can have a phone call? And I said, we can have the phone call, but you can't pay me. I want to help you to progress. That is why I'm here. So if any of you guys are stuck on anything, it's your fault. Okay. So anyway, rock on. Going back. Yes, you can introduce a character and then not see them for a minute, just as long as we keep those connections, making sure that our protagonist has those qualities that I already talked about. Your antagonist needs to be, whether it's a person or a thing, it needs to be a worthy adversary, a formidable opponent. Okay. It cannot just be a thing that causes this shift and change. It has to be something aggressive. And I don't mean necessarily always having to be aggressive, but it has to be a strong and significant antagonist, not something that's weak. That's your antagonist to your character. The greater the antagonist and his influence and his impact on all these different things, the greater your protagonist is going to have to become, right? You see, so you want to force your protagonist to grow and to change. And sometimes we don't necessarily see that as far as the character arcs in some stories, but just keep in mind, the external conflict is going to do something internally to your character. And we're going to see in our screenplay and on film the external results. All right. If you're writing your book and your story, writing your books and your novels and stuff, that takes place up in here in the reader's mind, and it stays in the reader's mind. You can do the thoughts and feelings and motivations. All that stuff is taking place in here. So you can write everything that's taken place. With us that are writing our screenplays, we don't have that luxury, which is kind of cool. Writing a screenplay is a visual art form, in case you didn't know that. You have to write visually. What's taking place on the inside of a character, you can't just say it's taking place on the inside of a character. You have to write something that reveals what's on the inside of a character. All right. So we have our protagonist that we care about. Otherwise, the plots don't even matter. And the conflict doesn't even matter because we don't care about the character. We have our antagonist that is a worthy adversary, a significant character coming against character or characters that are coming against your protagonist. Now, any supporting characters, this is going to be key because I obviously within 7 days, I can't go over everything, but if you are absorbing what it is that I'm giving to you, you're going to write a great screenplay. Okay. So your supporting characters, if you have buddy films, or I believe somebody had brought up that they, Samantha, not Samantha. Was it Samantha? Anyway, who was it? Sorry, I'm thinking about Sally. Sally brought up that she had a mother and daughter that are going through this, and she was trying to figure out who the main character was and how these stories can be put together. Any characters that you have, your main characters, any characters that you have in your story, they are either going to be helping your protagonist reach his goal, or they're going to be somehow opposing your protagonist reaching their goal. There is no middle ground. There is no in between. Otherwise, if you have a character that sits there and do nothing, they are worthless in your story. They're not adding to their story. They're not taking away from your story. So that means they are characters that need to be extracted. If you already have characters that are doing nothing in your story, you have to give them a push or a pull. Either they're going to be helping your pushing your protagonist towards his goal, or they're going to be pushing or opposing or coming against your protagonist that is trying to achieve their goal. Okay, everybody got that? It's a really, really simple concept. You see, there's a lot of things that you don't really need to go into detail. You can continue to learn. And again, I'm encouraging you, continue to learn, continue to grow. But with just some elements, some people are wired like, okay, I got it. I'll make those connections and I'll go ahead and move on. You see, and this is one of those elements. It is simple. You don't have to tell me nothing else. That supporting character needs to either support your character in his cause or oppose your character in their cause. And it can totally be inadvertent. It does not have to be obvious. They can just be literally in the way all the time, but it's still creating an opposition to your character. You see, now there's a point. But if they're sitting there and there's no purpose, they're not opposing, they're not pushing forward, they're not encouraging, they're not moving your, helping to move your protagonist toward their goal, then the character does not have a point in your story. All right. Does anybody have any questions on any of the stuff that I shared so far?
I have a question about the antagonist.
Yes.
So in one of my ideas, the antagonist isn't known to the protagonist. It's like a mysterious force. The audience doesn't know either. And I'm including little tidbits in the script where like little Easter eggs throughout the series. And then when, you know, the antagonist is revealed, it's like, oh, that explains that. So how can I effectively create a mysterious antagonist successfully?
We'll have to talk about that, Stephanie. We've done Zoom sessions before. If you want to do another Zoom session with me, let's connect, because that is really something. I would have to know your story.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I would have to kind of get into your story, because that's kind of more specific, because you're wanting to introduce something specific within your story, not kind of a generality. You know, I hope that makes sense. I'm not dodging. I'm saying let's connect and talk about that. Okay.
Sure.
Real quick, since it's just hitting on 8 o'clock, if you have time, if you got to bounce, then completely understand. I appreciate you guys, and I'm pulling for you. If you need help, come talk to me. Send me an email, message in the Legacy Street Writers group, and we'll get you going. But I am going to just share, I think you guys can see that. I didn't write these. I didn't do a picture thing because I just jotted these down. Let me tell you a story real quick. And this is going to be real quick, but it might help you. All right. You guys remember we did the class where I'm like, everything that happens in your life is a story. It's just whether or not you want to focus on it. Every encounter you have with any individual whatsoever, they're characters. If you want to see them, everybody's a character. You guys are all characters to me. Everybody's a character, right? Every encounter, everything you do is something that you can have to your story. All right, let me just give you something real quick. And this can make a great movie. I'm not focused on making it a movie right now, but I just want to share something real quick. Stephanie, you might have been here on one of these this classes. You might have heard told the beginning of it. I wrote down just kind of real briefly on these cards and outlined to a story. Okay, now this is a true story until it's not. But this is what happened. I was sitting here on our Zoom session, you know, in class, and it was a night class. So it was one of the 7 o'clock classes, and we go from 7 to 8, but end up around 9 or 9:30, sometimes 10, you know. But anyway, so we were on one of our Zoom sessions, and my phone just kept blowing up. All right. My phone just kept going off, and it was my wife. Now, my wife is a total prankster, total prankster. We had a surprise wedding, you guys. I got married and didn't even know I was getting married that day. That's how much of a prankster my wife is. I thought I was singing at somebody else's wedding because they said, hey, can you come play for me? One of my heroes, like, can you come play for me at a wedding? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to. He says, I want you to sing this song. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I didn't even ask whose wedding it was. So I showed up to this wedding, and here I am on the stage, and I'm playing my little music. My wife bought me some new clothes, so I'm up there, and people kept running up, and they're taking my picture and stuff. And I'm like thinking in my head, dang, I must look good. Everybody coming up and taking my picture, right? You know, and little did I know it was my wedding, you know, and I had no idea. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. But my wife's a total prankster. So she is always pranking me on stuff. So she'll blow up my phone just for the sake of it. You know, obviously that comes to issue when something really happens or whatever. So she kept calling my phone, and I kept, you know, doing the little thing, whatever. But then after I got off the call, it was about 9 o'clock. After I got off the Zoom session, and it was in a screenwriting class. After I got off the Zoom session, called my wife back, and she said, there's a shooting at the mall where my daughter works. There's a shooting at the mall. Go get my kid. And then she hangs up. What? Seriously? I tried to call her back and it didn't work or whatever. I asked one question. I said, what? I said, what, are you serious? Because she always pranking. And she's like, go get my kid. That's when I know she's serious, because she wasn't even my kid no more. You know what I mean? This is my daughter. And she's like, go get my kid. Right. And so anyway, I hang up the phone, and then obviously my head's racing. I throw on my clothes. It's nighttime. It was cold at this time. So I threw on a sweatshirt, a hoodie, you know, whatever. And then I race out, get in the car. And then I sat there for a minute. The mall's right down the street from my house. And then I'm thinking, oh no, I go back into my house and I grab my gun, right? Hey, there's a shooting at the mall. So I go and grab my gun. My gun is licensed to me, but I don't have a concealed permit, okay, carry permit. So that creates an issue, right? I don't have a concealed carry permit. But anyway, I grab my licensed gun so nobody gets me in trouble or whatever, and I get in the car. Now, I'm not going to go into any laws or anything, but all this stuff is going in my head. Here I am driving to the mall where there's a shooting. Helicopters are going crazy overhead. Great, police cars are racing down the street, and here I am driving in my car to the mall. People are speeding out of the mall, and here I am driving into the mall. Okay, so I get out of I get to the mall, and it's like now stop and go traffic trying to come out. And so I park far on the end, and here I'm thinking, I'm gonna literally, it's dark, everybody, they didn't identify who the shooters were, right? So nobody knows who the shooters are. Hello, all these people running around. So I'm thinking, should I take my gun or not? That's illegal. It's illegal. And in this time, and it's this day, you know what I mean? With everything that's going on in the world, here you have a shooting. I'm running around in a hoodie, and I'm now debating on whether I'm going to take my gun on me into a scene where cops are all over the place, right? And so I'm thinking, oh, I'm taking my gun. You know what I mean? And so here I am, I'm racing towards the mall on foot, you know, rushing up towards the mall because you can't get in any further. And then now I'm going to stop with the true story. I'm going to stop with what happened. Okay. Anyway, long story short, I end up getting my kid, right? Getting my kid or whatever. Here's the thing. That moment obviously created opportunity for a great story, right? And so I'm just going to share with you just some quick possibilities. And I hope you guys can see these. You know, here's my first card. This is what you write on cards. I hope you guys can see that. Trevor teaches, it's out of focus, isn't it? Let me see. Trevor teaches evening Zoom class. That's all I wrote on my card. That's it. Now I'm able to move to card number 2. Trevor's phone rings constantly during class. That's it, guys. I don't write any detail, no dialogue, nothing. That's it. All I need is cause and effect, what happens and what happens next. What happened is I was teaching a Zoom class, and then what happens next is my wife kept calling, interrupting my class. Okay, next card, this is all I write. Class ends, Trevor calls wife, bad news. That's it. No details about even what that bad news is. Why? Because in my head, either I know what that bad news is, or I'm going to come up with that bad news. All right. This is just the story that I shoot. Okay. This is a whole nother scene. Trevor storms out. Can you guys see that? Trevor storms out the house. That's all I write on my cards. That's it. That's a whole card. Now I'm able to move down to the next section. Okay. Next one. Trevor races back into the house. Retrieves gun. That's all I write on my card. Now I'm moving right along. So all those cards you saw, that's how I would go in my setup right down there. Notice I didn't describe who Trevor is or what he looked like. Okay. I'm not there yet. I don't care what Trevor looks like. Okay. Next scene, Trevor speeds in the car to the mall in his car. Okay. That's it. So if you guys are doing your outline and you're writing a book, you don't have to. All you're writing down is triggers, cause and effect, because one thing is going to naturally lead to another. If I grab my keys, I'm going to get in my car. If I get in my car, obviously I'm going to start my car and drive somewhere. All of those little things are cause and effect. Okay. So Trevor drives. Look at that. Trevor arrives at the mall. That's it. Nothing fancy, nothing special. All right. And I already told you, Trevor rushes on foot towards the mall, gun in hoodie. All right. That's it. That's all the detail you need. Now, this is all make believe. Trevor stopped and questioned by cop. All right. I don't even know how that conversation's going to go. I don't know what direction I'm going to go with it, but that's all I need if I wanted to continue to make and evolve this with this story. Okay. Watch this. This is all in my head. All this is made up, except for the part where on news, 3 dead, 1 is a cop. Okay, because the news is all over the place, and that's what the news is reporting. On news, 3 dead, 1 is a cop. Now, depending on how I would want to write this, either that phone call could be the inciting incident if my daughter was actually held hostage or something like that or whatever. So check out this next card. In my head, Trevor's daughter on news as the suspect. Okay. Tell me that would not jack up somebody's world. All right. That's what you want to do for people. Did you guys see that coming? Trevor's daughter is the one that shot these people and 1 cop is dead. You know, when you have a dead cop for 1, they're not playing nice. Dead suspect, dead people, obviously they're determined and they're focused. I respect cops. They, you know, for the most part, I think that I know a lot of good cops, but my point is you're at a whole nother level if a cop ends up getting killed, right? And here, just think about the elements, guys. And these are elements that you can draw. I'm running around in a hoodie. Mine is dark. It's dark blue. It says UCSB, Dad. UC Santa, you know, my kid goes to Santa Barbara, you know. So it says UCSB, Dad, on it, but it's still a hoodie nonetheless, and it's dark. And I have a gun inside there. And here I am running around, and now a cop is dead, okay? You see what I mean? And now my daughter, I come to find out, is the suspect, the suspected shooter. Now, that actually, minus the cop being dead, that actually happened. 2 teenagers got killed at the mall where my daughter works. And that's, I ran into that mall. And yes, I did have to make those decisions, but it creates tension because I know I'm unlicensed. No, I'm sorry. I'm not licensed to carry a concealed weapon. You see what I mean? So I know that if a cop approaches me and he asks to search me or something like that, if I refuse, obviously they're going to know something is up. They don't know who the suspect is. Therefore, everybody's a potential suspect and everybody's a potential gunman. And here I have a gun in my hoodie. You see what I mean? And so now I would just continue on with my story just to say, where do I want to go with it? You know? And yeah, I went pretty dark with it as far as what I can tell you was the second plot point. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My daughters are amazing. I have 5 daughters and a son. But my second plot point in there was my daughter shoots me. Okay? Because here's the thing. A lot of people, no sides, no nothing. I'm not being political. I'm not being nothing. I'm just observing that people are getting very, very passionate about what it is that they believe. And lines are being drawn. You can see that in the world today. Can you not? lines are being drawn, and people are coming against other people for different reasons. That's just the reality. I'm playing off of that. Maybe my daughter got caught up in believing this and that, whatever, and because my views are differently, I think that young people today deal with things differently than people did in yesteryears. Agree or not agree, it's my story. You know what I mean? I can write what I want to write. But the reality is, I can have it as a major plot point where here it is, I find my daughter, she says, I didn't do it, Dad, whatever. And I still got to try to get her away because I think the cops would be like, shoot first, ask questions later. And then ultimately, through all of our stuff, she ends up shooting me because of the indoctrinations and because of whatever. You know, I'm not saying that that's the story I'm telling. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that's how I do my cards. It's as simple as that. Nothing detailed. So let me just real quick, because I know this is time for question and answers. But just even going from the first card, I'll just pick a card. I will randomly pick a card. That's a stupid one. That's a stupid one. Okay, let's just say we start with our Zoom meeting, okay? Because I was like, okay, but we start with our Zooms in. When you have that card that says, you know, Trevor teaches an evening Zoom session, I don't need to know anything about that particular scene at all. When I go to write my screenplay, now my focus is only on that one moment. Once I have all my cards filled in, you know, I will encourage you guys to do an outline. I don't do it anymore. So in my book, in the book I'm working on right now, do an outline. If you're new to all this, do an outline. Me, I go right from my finished cards to my screenplay. I'm sitting in front of my computer because now every single card that I see, all I'm doing is focusing on that. I'm not focusing on anything else. And I'm seeing everything, everything. I see who's a part of the Zoom session. Before, it didn't even matter. All I needed to know was my setting, where I was at, and who I was encountering. Didn't need to know how many people were in the class. Didn't need to know anything about that. All I need to know was Trevor was teaching an evening Zoom session. Didn't even need to know what he was teaching. Right? But to make it easy, I was teaching screenwriting. So when I get to that card, the very first one, now I'm seeing my setting. Now I'm seeing the pictures on the wall or the stuff in the background or, you know, even who's on the other end of the Zoom session. And I'm writing that out. Me personally, I write everything with my eyes closed. That's just me. Because I see in such vivid detail, if you just, I put myself in the dark, the only thing I have on is my computer, and then I watch everything as it takes place. I'm watching it from an exterior. I'm not trying to come up with it. I'm watching it play out. So I'm watching me teach the Zoom session, and now I'm just looking around and pointing out the things that are relevant and important. And if they're not, I dismiss them. You can go into detail about what's in the background. You can go into detail about what kind of computer I'm using, what kind of camera, but if it doesn't matter, why am I even putting it? You see, in a novel, you can describe everything, all right? In a novel, do what you want to do. Novel, blow the pages up, right? But in a screenplay, if it's not relevant to your story, you know, don't put it. I don't care what kind of camera I'm using. I don't care what, you know, what's on the walls or anything like that. Well, yeah, I do. But you want to take as little time as possible. But once you see it, you could say, that's important. I'll go ahead and put that in. That may be relevant. I want to paint the picture. I want to do this. But you're watching everything and you can go as detailed as you want to go, as long as it's relevant to your story. That's with every single card. Every single card. When I had the encounter with the cop, I didn't say how many cops there were, you know. I didn't say what even what the dialogue was because I'm not even thinking about that. All I need to know is what the outcome is after that. You see? So if I have the encounter with the cop and then I'm going about my merry way, as far as those cards go, Trevor has an encounter with the cop, you know? And if I know the next card is Trevor's watching the news report, you know, with the news reporters or whatever, I already know I got away from the cop somehow. I don't have to think about how. I don't think about the details in that regard. What I need to know is what happened when you got with the cop? Nothing, right? And then the next scene, I'm watching a news report and the suspect is my daughter, right? And so when I'm with the cop, I'm seeing, okay, is it just one cop or two? All right, what does this cop look like? What's this interaction going to be like? What's the dialogue going to be like? That's the time when I'm thinking about the details of it, not when I'm doing my outline. I don't care. You see what I mean? If you got somebody going down the street and you want to have them get beat up, I like using easy examples, right? Going down the street, this person gets beat up, and then he goes back home. I don't need to know who beat him up and how he beat him up. I just know that he survived this mugging and he made it back home. Now, when I'm on my card, that specific card, I'm looking at the details of who and how many and what they beat him up with and how bad did they beat him up, and and the details of that. When I'm writing my cards, he walks down the street, this person gets mugged, he survives and crawls back home, or makes it back home. That's it. Now, when I'm looking at my cards, I start going into detail, looking at how many people beat him up. Did they use weapons? Yes or no? And now I'm looking at the details of that. Does that make sense, you guys? So I don't get caught up and I don't get stuck on nothing, because one thing leads to another. You do it every single day in your life. One thing leads to another, right? Time to go to work. You go through your routine to go to work. All right. And so I hope that helps, and that should help. One of the last things that I just want to say, and I'm sorry for keeping you guys, it's past our time, but one of the last things, just stressing knowing where you're going in the end, okay? Knowing where you're going before you start. Because my whole thing, and I say it all the time, I did it in that little pre-video, it's so important. Know where you're going before you start. Otherwise, you can expect to go nowhere and get nowhere. And I'm saying that because of this. When you wake up in the morning, if you have a morning job, or you wake up and you have a night job, when you wake up, you expect to go to work and you expect to return home. If you go to school, you expect to go to school and you expect to return home. You've got a vacation planned, you expect to leave for that vacation. So you expect to get to your destination. It's only when something gets in the way that you don't get to your destination. You're going to work and you get a flat. You go into work and you run out of gas. You go into work and your car breaks down if you're going to school. Then it's because of an outside element, something prevents you from getting to where you expect it to go. If you're not expecting to reach your destination, trust and believe you're not going to get there unless something interrupts you and you get there by chance. If you don't know where you're going before you start, you can count on going nowhere and getting nowhere, because that's what we're conditioned to do. We expect to wake up and do the things that we do, and it's only those interruptions that will cause us not to reach our destination. That's why it's so important to have where it is that you want to go and the message that you want to send. And the protagonist is your vehicle that carries that message. Okay? Your protagonist is your vehicle that carries that message. And if your protagonist is that vehicle that carries that message to the destination, you have to decide what that vehicle is going to be. Okay? A ride in a limo is different than a ride in a Pinto, right? Driving a Ferrari is different than going off-road. You don't take a Ferrari off-road to get to a destination, do you? You know what I mean? Off-road, you take an ATV, or you take a side-by-side, or you take a four-wheeler, you take those type of vehicles off-road. So if your story is off-road, you can't have a Ferrari as a vehicle. You need to find the appropriate vehicle to get you to your destination. And what they carry is the message that you are trying to send and the experience that you are wanting your audience to have. That's so crucial. And that's why I keep going back to that. So does anybody have any questions on anything that we covered? Next class, we're going to start actually going into the actual screenwriting. And for you novelists and you storytellers, you guys you will be able to follow along, because the creativity is in your storytelling. That's where all the real hard work is. And in your mindsets to make sure you do it. Now you're just taking that great story that you outlined and you're putting it in a screenplay format. Okay. And the mechanics of the screenplay is very, very simple. You know, you got to be creative in how you put things in there, but the mechanics are very, very simple. So I will be quiet now. Does anybody have any questions?